Today's video is brought to you by a certain quote Bruce Arians gave when discussing a missing piece on the Buccaneers defense, and the quote goes like this: "When I was in Arizona that last week, we'd always add that missing piece. We're looking for that missing piece right now, but there's someone out there. John Abraham came in, Dwight Freeney came in, guys that really impacted our defense, and Todd did a great job of matching them up, so we're nowhere near where we're going to be in September, so we'll just have to wait and see." So in today's video, guys, we're going to be talking about who that mysterious missing piece could be for the Buccaneers defense. So without further ado, guys, let's talk about it. Couple of things I want to note before I start talking about the candidates that could be potential additions to this Buccaneers defense. The first thing that I want to talk about is there's no timetable for when this addition is going to happen, because in the cases of both the players that Bruce Arians mentioned, John Abraham and Dwight Freeney, John Abraham signed with the Cardinals July 25th, and Dwight Freeney signed with the Cardinals October 12th in both the years that they joined the team. So there's not really a timetable. It could be months apart. You know, it could happen tomorrow, it could happen a month from now, it could happen 2 months from now. It could happen many months from now. We're just going to have to wait. This addition could come at any time. Second thing I want to note here is that it really doesn't matter whether or not a player struggled last year or not with, their previous teams. Obviously, if the Buccaneers and Bruce Arians and Todd Bowles feel that this player is their missing piece, they're going to add them. Now, in the case of John Abraham, this wasn't really a problem because he had many good years before joining the Arizona Cardinals, and very recently he was doing very good as well. But in the case of Dwight Freeney, he was actually struggling the past couple of years before he joined the Arizona Cardinals, and then obviously he joined and had 8 sacks in his lone season with the Cardinals, kind of having that bounce back year. So just because a player has struggled possibly last year or even the past 2 years does not mean they're automatically disqualified from joining this team and being that missing piece. Finally, you would like to think that it's more likely than not going to be a defensive end or pass rushing outside linebacker that's going to be joining the team, not just because both of the players that Bruce Arians mentioned, John Abraham and Dwight Freeney, were both in that type of role for Todd Bowles' defense, but also considering the injury to Jason Pierre-Paul, you would like to think that they're going to try and fill that void some way, shape, or form. So that kind of lends to the idea that it's probably going to be a defensive end or a pass rushing outside linebacker. Then finally, guys, yes, I understand that the Buccaneers do not have any money right now, but I do think they're going to be making some type of salary cap saving move, be it getting rid of a player or two, being it some type of contract restructuring. They still have a rookie or two that they need to sign from their draft class, so I think that they're going to be making a move that's going to be creating a decent amount of cap space, so not only that they can sign the remaining amount of their rookie free agents, but also because they want to make this kind of missing piece signing as well. So guys, with all of that being said, I have 3 types of categories for who this missing player could be. The first category is players who I know they're not going to be, but I know people are going to want me to talk about them anyway, so I'm going to be talking about them in this video. The second category is players who I think could potentially be the missing piece type of signing for the Buccaneers defense, but it's probably not too likely. And then finally, the last category is players that I think that could very, very well be the missing piece signing for this Buccaneers defense. So without further ado, let's get into the first category, which is players that I think are not going to be the missing piece signing. So ultimately for this section, it really just boils down to players who have already signed with another team or players who are just flat out asking for too much money. In the case of guys like Ezekiel Ansah, Jamie Collins, and Shane Ray, those guys have already signed with other teams. Ezekiel Ansah signed with the Seattle Seahawks, Jamie Collins signed with the New England Patriots, and Shane Ray signed with the Baltimore Ravens. All 3 of those guys would have been some pretty interesting additions, but they're already gone to other teams. And then finally, in the case of a guy who's asking for too much money, it's going to be Ndamukong Suh. I don't think Ndamukong Suh is going to be the addition. I have seen some Bucs fans talk about wanting a guy like Ndamukong Suh. I just really don't think he would be a solid addition to this Buccaneers locker room and just kind of the culture that the Buccaneers are forming right now for the team, especially with his price tag. There's been reports coming out that he wants around $10 million, which I just don't think the Buccaneers should pay flat out. And then also there were reports coming out that last year with his season with the Los Angeles Rams, he was kind of coasting his way to the playoffs, kind of like like what LeBron does with the NBA. I mean, although LeBron didn't make the playoffs this past season, but that doesn't matter. The point is that, you know, kind of in a similar way, Ndamukong Suh was kind of taking plays, taking series off in the regular season, that was saving his body for the playoffs. I don't think that would fit what the Buccaneers are doing right now. They kind of need all of their players to be playing as hard as they possibly can. So in the case of a guy like Ndamukong Suh, matching his attitude, his way, how he would fit into the locker room, and his price tag, he just doesn't fit in this scenario. Now I want to talk about a couple of guys who could potentially be this missing piece addition, but honestly, I don't really see it happening. Guys like Morris Claiborne, Trey Boston, Eric Berry, those are guys that could be really nice additions to the Buccaneers secondary, but they just don't really fit the Buccaneers needs anymore. In the case of Morris Claiborne, I know Evan from Bucs.wave on Instagram, he loved Morris Claiborne in the early stages of free agency, and yes, fair credit, it would have been a really, really good value signing for this team to kind of have him be a potential starting outside and potentially even starting nickel corner. But now, post-draft and post-free agency, the Buccaneers have really kind of settled in with their secondary depth at the cornerback position. You have guys like Vernon Hargreaves and Carlton Davis, who are possibly going to be the starting outside cornerbacks, although with the way OTAs have been going right now, that's kind of up in the air. You also have guys like Sean Bunting and Jamel Dean, who were just drafted in the second and third rounds of this most recent draft. So it's really safe to say that the Buccaneers have been investing a lot of draft picks in their cornerback room the past couple of years. Obviously, Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, Sean Bunting, and Vernon Hargreaves all being drafted in the first 3 rounds the past couple of years. It's pretty safe to say that the Buccaneers are probably going to roll with those guys, and there's just flat out not a lot of room for Morris Claiborne on this roster. The next 2 guys I want to mention are kind of in a similar boat to Morris Claiborne, both Trey Boston and Eric Berry. Again, both 2 guys who would be really solid additions to this Buccaneers secondary and this Buccaneers safety group. But again, the Buccaneers have just been investing so many draft picks in their secondary as a whole. Again, I just don't think that the need is there anymore, because you have Mike Edwards, who was just recently drafted in the 3rd round. You have MJ Stewart, who was drafted in the 2nd round. You have Justin Evans, who was drafted in the 2nd round as well. And you have Jordan Whitehead, who was just drafted in the 4th round a couple years ago as well. So again, the Buccaneers have been investing a ton of draft picks in their secondary, and Trey Boston and Eric Berry, they're both good, and they both have very good abilities as veteran safeties, but I just don't see them being this kind of missing piece addition to the Buccaneers right now. I think that there are more significant needs on other portions of the Buccaneers defense. Now we can start talking about players that I do genuinely think that the Buccaneers are going to consider adding to this defense. Now there's only 3 of them. Now obviously this list could change as the offseason goes on, especially around the time of year whenever the teams are making their final roster cuts. Obviously before week 1 there's a ton of roster cuts that are made, and when that happens I'm sure I'll make a video talking about certain players the Buccaneers could add. But as it stands right now, like if we had to make a decision like in June or July, there's a couple of players that I really do think that the Buccaneers could really add to this defense that would be really productive for them. First guy I want to talk about is Muhammad Wilkerson. Now I definitely think that he could be a very, very good potential addition. He's still under 30, I believe he's 29 years old, and the story with Muhammad Wilkerson is kind of interesting because a few years ago, back whenever the Jets were running a 3-4 defense and Muhammad Wilkerson was a 3-4 defensive end, he was one of the best 3-4 defensive ends in the entire league. Like, he was lighting up the stat sheets, he was having some phenomenal years, and then he got a really big contract extension. I believe he got a 5-year, $87 million contract, and then after that, he struggled a little bit. I believe he had 8 sacks in 2 seasons, which again, isn't too terrible, but whenever you factor in that type of money and that type of contract that he was given, it is a little bit disappointing. So this resulted in him getting released from the New York Jets. He would then go join the Green Bay Packers, where he wouldn't play a lot. A lot of that was due to injury, but I think that honestly, it's safe to say that if he played his full year with Green Bay, I think he could have had a bounce back year, but injuries really prevented him from making a impact with Green Bay, and now he's currently a free agent. And from what I've seen, a lot of people analyzing the type of player that Muhammad Wilkerson is, a lot of what I'm seeing is that Muhammad Wilkerson would really do good with having a strong locker room around him. And I think that with the current coaching staff for the Buccaneers, obviously Todd Bowles being Muhammad Wilkerson's former head coach, that's kind of a thing that happens, Obviously Todd Bowles and Muhammad Wilkerson have a long, deep, rich history with one another. You also got to factor in that locker room and that coaching staff that the Buccaneers have right now would be a really good fit for Muhammad Wilkerson, and I think would really get him back on track. So I think that Muhammad Wilkerson would be a very solid addition to this defense. If you could get the version of him where he was one of the better 3-4 defensive ends a few years ago, you'd be getting a freaking steal, especially this late into free agency. He would be a really good addition, and it just makes a lot of sense because Todd Bowles, his former head coach, and a lot of the former Jets coaching staff like Casey Rogers, former Jets defensive line coach, have all worked with Muhammad Wilkerson extensively, like in a huge way. So basically, I think it's pretty safe to say that if the Buccaneers want Muhammad Wilkerson and Muhammad Wilkerson wants to come to Tampa Bay, a deal would get done, no doubt. You could even possibly get a little bit of a discount. So, Muhammad Wilkerson, he would be a very, very solid addition. Next guy I want to talk about is Nick Perry, the former defensive end and pass rushing outside linebacker for the Green Bay Packers. Now, the big thing about Nick Perry is last year he only had 1.5 sacks, but he's been plagued with injuries throughout his entire career, which again, I really don't think should be something that should keep Buccaneers fans away from signing a guy like Nick Perry, and also the Buccaneers themselves shouldn't keep them away from signing a guy like Nick Perry as well, because he did have 7 sacks in 2017, and 11 sacks in 2016 as well. So whenever Nick Perry is healthy, he's insanely productive, and I think that he would be another really good fit in this Todd Bowles defense. Perry has worked very extensively in 3-4 defenses as well. I believe he just turned 29 or 30 years old, so again, kind of adding a more veteran-y type of presence, kind of like in the case of Muhammad Wilkerson as well. It just fits the scheme, he fits the mold, and he has that pass rushing ability that has been shown in seasons past. It's just all a matter of him getting healthy, but I could see the Buccaneers adding him, kind of using him more as a rotational type of guy, kind of like what Bruce Arians and Todd Bowles did with Dwight Freeney during his time with the Arizona Cardinals a few years ago. So I think that Nick Perry would be a very solid addition and a very versatile piece as well. You have Derek Morgan, formerly of the Tennessee Titans. Now, a lot of you guys might remember the name Derek Morgan because Jason Licht has had interest in Derek Morgan in the past as a defensive end. Back whenever Derek Morgan's first contract ran out with the Tennessee Titans, Jason Licht was interested. I believe they actually brought Derek Morgan for a visit, and they were pretty darn close to signing him, if memory does serve me well, but in the end, he did end up re-signing with the Tennessee Titans, and now he's a free agent once again, and he's pretty much the same age as Nick Perry. I believe he might be a year older or a year younger, one or the other. But again, much like Nick Perry, he does struggle with injuries a little bit. He had only half a sack in 2018, but a lot of this was due to a shoulder injury that was bothering him. But in 2017, he had 7.5 sacks, and in 2016, he had 9 sacks. But this one's really interesting because Jason Licht has obviously had interest in Derek Morgan in the past, so I think they could at least bring him in for a visit because Jason Licht has wanted Derek Morgan before. And I still think that Derek Morgan, much like Nick Perry, once he's fully healthy, he's a good pass rusher. He has that similar mold of a defensive end / pass rushing outside linebacker, and I really think that, again, he'd be a really solid addition. You add him with Shaq Barrett, Noah Spence, Anthony Nelson, and all the other guys on that defensive line, you've got some pretty darn good pass rushing ability, in my opinion. I think both Morgan, Perry, and Wilkerson, they would all fit very well into this locker room with what's going on right now, and I think that they would be very solid additions. So yeah, guys, that's pretty much it. Let me know who you think could be this mystery, missing piece signing down in the comment section below. If I had to rank my 3 top picks, I guess I would say Muhammad Wilkerson would make the most logistical sense in terms of an overall signing because, half of his coaching staff from his time in the New York Jets is currently on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coaching staff, at least the ones who worked with him the most. So it would make a lot of sense if, the Buccaneers would bring him in at least for a visit and consider signing him because he fits Todd Bowles' scheme beautifully. He's definitely going to have that motor coming off of a down season with Green Bay, and he's going to want to work hard because of the locker room atmosphere and the presence of Todd Bowles and Bruce Arians. So I would say that Muhammad Wilkerson would probably be the top guy right now in a logistical sense. Derek Morgan, I think, has another really good shot of joining this team just because of the history Jason Licht has in terms of his interest with a guy like Derek Morgan, and also just because he's a pretty productive pass rusher whenever he's healthy. And then Nick Perry, I think that he's a guy who also makes a lot of sense as well because when he is healthy, again, he had some really good productive seasons in Green Bay. He just kind of fits that mold of fitting in a good 3-4 defense. All 3 of these guys do, which is why I think that they are 3 of the top guys who could be that missing piece. But again, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section section below. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you all enjoyed, but until the next video or the next live stream, I'll see you guys in the next one. But until then, and as always, goodbye for now, guys, and go Bucs.